All right, it is exactly 2:30, so we can get started here. Today we'll be going through the ArcGIS Enterprise and Introduction for Developers session. My name is Maggie Busick. I'm a product manager on the ArcGIS Enterprise team, and I'm joined by my colleague Justin today. Justin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Justin Mallinkraut, and I work with Maggie as a product manager for ArcGIS Enterprise.
All right. So before we dive into the content here, I did want to let you all know that we are taking feedback for this and all of the other sessions at the conference this week. We really appreciate your feedback. It helps to ensure that we're covering content that is relevant to you, that we're delivering it in a way that really resonates. And so if you have a minute or two in the next couple of days and want to submit your feedback using the Esri Events app, we'd really appreciate it. We read every survey, we tune and tailor our presentations based on it, so we'd love to hear from you. Now, what we'll actually be covering today, we'll start out with an agenda here just to know everything we'll be going through in this session. We'll start out talking about what ArcGIS Enterprise is. Of course, this is an introductory session, so learning about this product of ArcGIS Enterprise. And we'll really look at it from three key perspectives: that of end users, of administrators, and then from the developer perspective. And that's where we'll really spend the bulk of our time today. We'll take a look at the REST APIs and the Enterprise SDK. The Enterprise SDK allows us to extend Enterprise in a variety of ways using server object extensions, server object interceptors, custom data feeds, and then an additional extensibility option of webhooks we'll talk about as well. Maybe you're building your own custom applications. A great tool for that is the variety of client SDKs and APIs we have available for you. So we'll talk about the Maps SDK for both JavaScript and native apps, and then we'll talk a little bit about the ArcGIS API for Python and some non-Esri options that we have for integrating with. So starting out here, what is ArcGIS Enterprise? Again, this is an intro session, and so we'll start here with a really kind of high-level definition of the product. We see ArcGIS Enterprise as the foundational system for mapping and visualization, data management, spatial analysis, building your applications to share out all of that great work. And in this way, we really see it as that backbone for all of your GIS workflows. We know Enterprise also needs to often work with other ArcGIS products. You might be using the full ArcGIS platform from ArcGIS Pro to ArcGIS Online, as well as our full suite of applications. And Enterprise integrates with all of those products as well. The unique thing about ArcGIS Enterprise is that it's self-hosted software, so it's going to be installed on infrastructure that you control. You'll decide whether you want that infrastructure to be in the cloud, be on premises, on physical servers, and then you'll scale it up to meet your needs. So let's break this down a little bit, kind of understanding who these different parts of that product definition are really speaking to. First part of the definition here is really talking to our end users. These are the folks that are doing that mapping and visualization, doing data management, delivering their work through applications. And they're often using a variety of ArcGIS products in their work, maybe apps like dashboards or instant applications, ArcGIS Pro, things like that. Do we have any GIS professionals in the audience here today? Okay, a few of you. So a lot of that work is going to speak to you here. Now, the second part of this definition here is really speaking to our IT professionals or IT administrators in the audience. You're responsible for designing, architecting, and maintaining this self-hosted system of ArcGIS Enterprise, deciding where you want to deploy it, and then continuing to scale it to meet your needs. Do we have folks that consider themselves IT administrators or professionals in the audience? Awesome, so a few of you here too. And then developers live across this whole stack of ArcGIS Enterprise. Maybe you're building custom applications to share out that GIS work to your users or constituents. Maybe you're scripting and automating some of the workflows that our IT administrators are taking on, supporting that maintenance of the system. I'm guessing we probably have a few developers in the audience today. Can I see a show of hands here? Awesome. Yep, lots of you. So we'll be focusing largely on that story in our session. Taking a little bit of a deeper look at these different perspectives, ArcGIS Enterprise from the perspective of end users often is really happening within the ArcGIS Enterprise portal. And that's that browser-based interface that we're seeing here. This is where you are doing things like interacting with your content, doing mapping and visualization, maybe doing analysis in the browser, using analysis tools in the map viewer. You're accessing content that's your own, that's shared with you within your organization, or you might be even accessing Living Atlas content, a rich set of layers that are provided to you by Esri to enrich the content that you have within your own organization. Within this enterprise portal, we also have a subset of end users called organizational administrators who are responsible for providing access to their users to access the system. So providing licenses, adding members, controlling the look and feel of the organization. And that is all happening here in the enterprise portal as well. Now, how many of you are familiar with ArcGIS Online? All right, quite a few. Well, this enterprise portal experience is going to look quite familiar to you. On the front end, ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online look nearly identical. Of course, there's some nuance between the two, especially depending on which version of ArcGIS Enterprise you're on. Maybe there's specific functionality that'll look different in one versus the other, but largely that front-end user experience is very consistent. That's intentional. We actually share a code base that we branch between the two products. But the big distinction between ArcGIS Enterprise and ArcGIS Online is the difference of SaaS and software. And so this is really getting into that kind of IT perspective on the products. ArcGIS Online is our software as a service offering, meaning that we as Esri host that system for you. We maintain it. It's on infrastructure that we're responsible for controlling. And you just get a subscription to ArcGIS Online. It's stood up, starts running, and then you can do your work there. ArcGIS Enterprise, by contrast, is that self-hosted software, meaning that you are architecting, deploying, and maintaining the system. This comes with additional work, of course. There's that whole IT administrator story that we don't necessarily have for ArcGIS Online, but it also puts a lot of power in your hands and gives you a lot of opportunity to have control over your system. As an IT administrator, you'll be making a lot of decisions about how to deploy and run your ArcGIS Enterprise. First, you'll choose which deployment option you want to use, whether you run on Windows, on Linux, or use our cloud-native option of ArcGIS Enterprise on Kubernetes. We got to see that in the plenary this morning. You'll decide what infrastructure you want to use to host your system. Maybe it'll be on premises, that could be on those physical servers, it could be in virtual machines in a private cloud, maybe on public cloud infrastructure, whatever makes most sense to you. You'll make decisions about security and the level of access that you want your system to have to the open internet. Maybe you want your enterprise to be exclusively accessible within inside of your firewall, or maybe it can live outside of your firewall. It could be connected to the open internet, or maybe it has to exist in a totally disconnected environment because of the security requirements of your organization. All of this is possible with Enterprise. From there, you'll start to think about the level of uptime or the availability that you need for your system. Do you have a particular service level agreement that you need to meet with your users, whether internal or external, supporting them with that availability of the system? And that will help to inform the scale of your deployment. ArcGIS Enterprise can be installed on a single machine, that works, but we often see organizations building beyond that to meet their needs. Maybe 4 machines, 2 machines, 8 machines, the list goes on, really depending on, again, that availability you need, thinking about the scale that will really support your users. Now, as an IT administrator, it's probably helpful to understand kind of behind the scenes what ArcGIS Enterprise looks like. And so here on the screen, we have the concept of the ArcGIS Enterprise base deployment. This is specifically for our Windows and Linux deployment options. ArcGIS Enterprise on Kubernetes is our cloud-native option, as I said, and it's built on a series of microservices, so the architecture looks very different behind the scenes, but the majority of our users today are on Windows and Linux, so we'll focus here on that architecture. And ArcGIS Enterprise base deployment on Windows and Linux is made up of a variety of software components that are kind of strung up together. The great part about Enterprise is that it's highly customizable. You can build it out, meet those needs of your organization, but to get up and running, you'll need this concept of the base deployment. And the base deployment is made up of 4 software components. We have our ArcGIS data store, our ArcGIS server, portal for ArcGIS, and then 2 ArcGIS web adapters. And as an end user, or even as a developer, maybe you're not so worried about the different back-end components that support the software, but it's helpful to have this kind of conceptual picture of the different pieces of ArcGIS Enterprise to have those conversations with your IT team. Maybe you need to troubleshoot something, allocate additional resources to a particular software component to empower your work. And so understanding those pieces of the software that you're hitting can help to inform those conversations. On the flip side, as an IT administrator, maybe you're not aware of all of the work that's happening on the front end of ArcGIS Enterprise, but understanding where these different personas are interacting with the software can help you to understand how to better support them. So let's learn about what these software components actually do. First up, we have our portal for ArcGIS. And this is the software component that supports or enables that ArcGIS Enterprise portal, that web-based experience we were looking at a few slides ago. Your enterprise portal is the place where you're working with all of your content, your different items. Those could be maps, apps, could run analysis there. You're sharing content from your desktop, your ArcGIS Pro, to the enterprise portal to get that content out to your organization. And again, this is the place where ArcGIS Enterprise looks very similar to ArcGIS Online. Next up, we have our ArcGIS server, and we consider this kind of the powerhouse behind ArcGIS Enterprise. It runs what are called GIS services, and these support all of those items that you're seeing within your enterprise portal. The ArcGIS server is going to handle any compute requests that come in through the enterprise portal, hitting those items. So whether you're zooming around on a map, you're running an analysis, you're trying to find a location, all of those requests are being handled by the ArcGIS server. The ArcGIS server needs to, of course, serve up data, and that data is going to come from a couple of places. It could either come from what we call user-managed data sources, so your own data sources that you manage. Maybe it's a database, maybe SQL Server, Oracle, things like that. It could be a cloud data warehouse. The ArcGIS server will serve up data from there. Or it could be serving hosted content as well, or ArcGIS managed data. And that's stored in our ArcGIS data store. The ArcGIS data store is another component of that base deployment that we've been talking about. And it is going to store all of that hosted content. So data that is published to ArcGIS Enterprise and copied and stored there is going to be stored in your ArcGIS data store. Particular actions that are happening in your enterprise portal, things like running analysis tools. There might be results that need to be saved and stored somewhere. You're running a buffer, for instance, on a map. Those results will also be stored in your ArcGIS data store. Now, the story of the ArcGIS data store has evolved a little bit in recent releases. And this is really focused on the ability to support your work with both 2D and 3D content in ArcGIS Enterprise. The ArcGIS data store comes in a variety of flavors to support different types of data that you might be working with. And as part of the base deployment, you'll need it enabled for both the relational data store and the object store. Again, supporting your 2D content through the relational data store and 3D content like scene services or 3D tiles with the object store. So just a little bit of an evolution there in recent releases. Now, beyond that base deployment, organizations, of course, want to add on additional capabilities to enable specialized work that they may be doing. And one really common way that we see this is adding on additional server roles to their ArcGIS Enterprise that support working with specific types of data or specific workflows. The GIS server is part of that ArcGIS Enterprise base deployment, supporting all of those GIS services that we talked about. But maybe you're working with things like real-time data, and you might want to have a GeoEvent server to support that. Maybe you're processing and interacting with large amounts of imagery. Image server can support that. Maybe you want to embed video data alongside of your spatial data. Video server is a way to do that with ArcGIS Enterprise. Or maybe you want to automate some of your processes, or even get into machine learning and deep learning using the notebook server. We have other sessions at the conference that do a deeper dive into these additional server roles. I definitely recommend checking those out. It's a little beyond just the introductory session, but I think this really speaks to how you can kind of build out Enterprise to meet the specific needs of your organization and the types of work you might be doing. We saw some of these things on stage at plenary earlier today, for example, knowledge server, enabling those knowledge graphs we were looking at. Now, that was our IT administrator and end user group, but getting to developers here, again, the bulk of our content is really going to be focused on this developer story today. And ArcGIS Enterprise has a strong developer story, offering you a lot of tools to extend your ArcGIS Enterprise, build custom applications, and interact with those different components of the software we were speaking to. The REST APIs that Justin will talk us through here really provide the underpinnings for our entire system, allowing you to interact with content, services, and administrative workflows. You can extend the existing capabilities of ArcGIS Enterprise, building on what comes out of the box using the ArcGIS Enterprise SDK. And then we'll talk about our higher level APIs, again, that we can use for building our own custom applications and scripting and automating some of our work. So with that, Justin, you want to talk to us about the REST APIs here?
Yeah, so as we kick off into the REST APIs, as Maggie alluded to, this is really the fundamental underpinning. Everything at the end of the day is exposed through a set of REST APIs. And when I say everything, I literally mean everything that the software does in terms of ArcGIS Enterprise. There's no magic API that we hide from everyone behind the scenes. Every API is accessible to you all as developers, GIS professionals, and IT administrators. So I kind of want to take a conceptual look at the way we view ArcGIS Enterprise and how we've configured our REST APIs. So if we think about it at the users at the very top, these are the individuals who are interacting with the software application. And we can categorize them into different types, such as end users, administrators, developers, each with their own unique needs and interactions with the software. And then we have the user experience, and this really encompasses all aspects of the user's interaction with the software. And this includes the overall feel, the ease of use, and how well it meets their needs. Next, we have the information model. And this model defines the structure and organization of data within the software. It includes the different entities and how they're related to each other, some of the properties of those entities. So like a user would have attributes such as name, email, role, and also we'll have how the data moves through the system and how it's actually processed. When we think about the functionality layer, this refers to the specific features and capabilities of the software. And lastly, the infrastructure layer. This is the underlying technology and systems that support the software. So thinking of like physical devices, machines that run the software, as well as your network and security information. So kind of using the information that Maggie provided to us about the different components that make up ArcGIS Enterprise, you can kind of think of how we apply it in this way. So on that top half, we have Portal for ArcGIS as the gateway for users to access and share their GIS content and resources. And then that bottom half is really getting powered by ArcGIS Server. And it's powering those GIS services, those map services, feature services, geoprocessing services. All of those services, each individual service, I should say, has its own process that runs on the ArcGIS Server machine. And so for each of these three kind of bottom layers where we have the information, functionality, and infrastructure, they each have their own REST API. So the information model, we refer to this as the sharing API. Functionality, we refer to this as the services API. And the infrastructure layer is where the portal administration and the server administration endpoints are. So the sharing API allows you to work at that information model with users, groups, and items. Again, all of this within Portal for ArcGIS. And then the API for services allows you to do that functionality. So to do visualization or maybe other work with specific services. And this again is calling on that ArcGIS server machine. And the REST API for administration is the infrastructure, where that's kind of maybe setting up your environment, troubleshooting, triaging those aspects. And those all have different endpoints for portal and for server. So all of these different parts are all different have different URLs and different endpoints that they're accessed from. And this is really important for you as developers and IT professionals to really understand what the different endpoints are and what they're doing. As Maggie alluded to, on Kubernetes, this is a little bit different. So on Windows and Linux, this could be potentially on different machines. You could have a portal machine, a machine with server running, a machine with data store running, all three different machines, all three different URLs that you're trying to access. And it's really important to know those. So let's jump into the sharing API. This actually is available for online and for enterprise, and again, focuses on users, groups, and items. So what we've actually done to make this easy as seamless as possible is make this almost identical between online and enterprise. So some of you that have experience might have already worked with this API before, and it allows you to create applications that can seamlessly work in either other product. The main difference, though, with online is going back to this URL. Online is always going to be arcgis.com, but enterprise, you're going to need to provide that URL. So again, it's important to know that. I think a great example is when you're using a field app. If anyone's set up a field app for the first time, it asks you, do you want to use online or do you want to use enterprise? And if you press enterprise, you now have to enter a URL, and you're not going to be able to proceed without that. So again, this API is great for retrieving permissions and privileges from existing content, but you can do so much more. You can create new content, you can create new web maps, you can add new groups. If anyone's used the ArcGIS companion in online, that is leveraging the sharing API that's literally built on top of this. So now going into the services API, this is into that functionality tier. This is where we're talking about working with web services, and these can come in different types. They can come in as map services where ArcGIS Server is doing the rendering. So an example would be, please draw at this extent from this service, and you're going to get a JPEG or a PNG back. Or it could be more complicated workflows with feature services, getting access to vector data, or individual feature services doing different types of sync and going offline, going back online, then going back offline again. Some examples of this would be like geocoding and networking services that are also available, and this allows you to do routing on street networks, for example. Geoprocessing is another great extensibility point for developers. You can write your own Python-based business logic, then publish that as a service, run that service from ArcGIS Server. So again, the biggest difference with enterprise and online here is that enterprise is going to have a much broader set of geospatial services that you can take advantage of compared to ArcGIS Online. And to continue with the services API, here we have an image of what the endpoint looks like if we were to access it through a web browser. So everyone has access to Sample World Cities. So if you've installed ArcGIS Server, Sample World Cities is a default map service that comes with it. It allows you to build 2D maps. And we can see from this screenshot in the top half, we can view this multiple ways next to the view in kind of line item. You can see ArcGIS Online Map Viewer is listed here, but you can do so much more than just view the map service. And if you look at the bottom half of this screenshot, you can see things like export, which will give me that JPEG or that PNG in that certain characteristics that I've requested. We can also do identify, which can be used to discover features at a specific geographic location within a map service. And here you can access also the JSON for these requests via the services APIs and to build those into your custom apps. And so the last set of APIs I want to go over here is the admin API. And now we're working at that infrastructure level. And as I mentioned, each component has their own set of admin APIs, so it's different from portal and server, and each server machine, you'll be able to choose which one you want to engage with. You can leverage this API to set up your environment, to troubleshoot this environment, and also just to monitor ArcGIS Enterprise. Has anyone have experience using ArcGIS Enterprise already? Few people. Has anyone called tech support? Someone? Have you maybe been to this endpoint working with tech support? I feel like this is a very common place if you're having some challenges that they'll have you kind of work at. Again, with Kubernetes, this is unified, which is a great thing for you developers. You only have to go into one place to make those calls. So we have simplified that for you in there. And so that's going to kind of wrap up the 3 APIs that I want to talk about in terms of out-of-the-box functionality. So again, this is all of our APIs, how ArcGIS Enterprise works, all accessible to you out of the box. But what if you want to change some of this functionality or maybe add some of that functionality? Well, that's where we're going to start to get into these enterprise SDKs. And the enterprise SDKs is really, it captures on how we can expose the extensibility with this. I was engaging with one of our senior principal consultants from our professional services department, and he told me that this is the biggest value add that ArcGIS Enterprise has. The amount of SDKs and APIs that we're building, continue to build on top of, really is what you can maximize your value out of. So what is an enterprise SDK? Well, it allows you to extend map and image services specifically. So we can take these services published from Pro and extend them to do more. And there's 2 types of extensions that we can do this with, and that's an SOE, which is a server object extension, and an SOI, which is a server object interceptor. I'll go over more about these 2 in a little bit. These can be written in .NET or in Java, and then they're deployed and enabled through ArcGIS Server Manager. Some of you that might have some experience working with these products as a developer might have seen some of this documentation in terms of the ArcObjects SDK, and that was based off ArcMap. And there is a lot of kind of overlap with those, very similar. We did want to make that transition easy for you. But if you've never looked at the ArcObjects SDK, today is not the day to start doing that. So don't even go look at it. It's not worth it. ArcMap will be retired here in a few months. It is definitely not your time. So what are SOEs? SOEs allow you to add custom functionality to ArcGIS server services. They run on the server and can perform complex geospatial operations that are not available out of the box. SOEs can expose new REST endpoints, enable custom operations. They can also integrate with external systems and databases, allowing for advanced data processing and analysis. Since SOEs run on the server, they can handle large data sets and perform intrusive computations very efficiently. And so these are only for map services. They're not for image services. That's a little caveat there. But they can be written for a one-to-one or a one-to-many in terms of services. So you have that option when working with SOEs. And then let me give you a very, very simple example of what an SOE is. So we'll act like it's election night, and we want to share this data with our local county that we're voting for, right? So we don't have all of the data, though, in this table. All we have is the local counties, and then we have candidate A and candidate B for these counties. And our local state officials said, hey, we want to show the percentage of this, right? So that is where the SOE is going to come into play, because this would be incredibly burdensome for someone at a client level to go and to update the percentage, right? Because this data is incredibly dynamic. It's election night. We're getting new results in by the second, by the minute. It's constantly updating. To sit someone there would be not realistic. So we'll use the SOE to extend the data that we have in this service. We can go in, we can query that data, and then we can calculate the percentages before returning the result to the end user. All of this through a seamless experience with an SOE. So now, SOIs, on the other hand, allow you to intercept and modify requests or responses for existing ArcGIS server services. So that's really kind of in the middle where we're making those changes. So this can be useful to implement custom logic or for modifying responses before they get sent back to the client. This can enable custom data filtering, enrichment, or validation. SOIs do all of this without having to teach the client anything new. The application making the call doesn't need to know that you have an SOI injected into that request pipeline. So a very, very basic SOI example is if we want to go back to that export call that I talked about, right? So give me an extent, draw me a PNG, give that to me. Well, what I want to do is I want to add a watermark in for every PNG or JPEG that gets exported, and I want to make sure that it's not the user doing it. So that way I know 100% every time something is exported, it will have this watermark. Well, that's exactly why this SOI will come into play, right? So it'll intercept that request, apply the watermark, then complete the export request, giving that image with that watermark to that end user. So this is, again, is very basic, and it can be used for so much more than just branding, right? But it can be used for security, for drilling down to specific access rights, for who might have access on a specific layer, on a specific service. You can really kind of get into this. I've seen some of our partners do some amazing things with SOIs. All right, so now I want to kind of change gears and talk about custom data feeds. So this was talked about in the plenary for a little bit. First time hearing about custom data feeds in the plenary earlier today? Only a couple of you. Oh, okay, so a lot of people are getting all right. So I'm going to go over custom data feeds allow you to access and use data from sources that are not natively supported by ArcGIS. This is particularly useful when integrating data from proprietary formats, third-party systems, or maybe remote locations into your GIS environment. On screen is how custom data feeds work and then when to use them. So first we want to create a custom data feed provider using a custom data feed command line tool that's included in the ArcGIS Enterprise SDK. And this tool allows you to write custom code, typically in JavaScript, to fetch data from your data sources and then format that into GeoJSON. Once developed, your custom data provider is packaged into a custom data package file, which is a .cdpk, and then that file can be registered with ArcGIS Server. That custom data package is deployed and where it runs as a feature service on ArcGIS Server. This then allows web clients, desktop apps like Pro or Field apps to access that service and use the data provided through that custom data feed. So when should you use custom data feeds? Well, when you need to access data, again, stored in formats that are not natively supported by ArcGIS Enterprise. You could use this when you need to fetch and serve data maybe in real time that is stored in remote locations. Or if you prefer not to register your data source with ArcGIS Enterprise, custom data feeds provides a way to access and use that data without registering it. A couple examples for this would be a retail company wants to visualize their customer and rating reviews from Yelp. They develop a custom data feed that fetches this information using the Yelp Fusion API, and then that integrates right into ArcGIS Enterprise into their full GIS system. Another example would be an environmental agency needs to access real-time sensor data for remote weather stations. They can create a custom data feed that streams this data into their GIS for analysis and visualization. Custom data feeds provide a flexible and powerful way to extend the capabilities of ArcGIS Enterprise, enabling you to integrate a wide variety of data sources into your GIS workflows. And so kind of talking about that feature service that gets created, what's that process really look like? Well, the first step is we need to have a custom data provider. So that is writing custom code to fetch and format data from this source. This is typically done, again, in JavaScript and in tandem with the ArcGIS Enterprise SDK. This will allow you to build that .cdpk file And then the second step is to register, again, that CDPK file through ArcGIS Server Manager. That's going to create this feature service for us and then allow all of those clients to consume that feature service. So some considerations, though, is feature layers created from custom data providers are only they read only by default. So if your custom data provider supports editing, you can configure the feature layer to be editable through the ArcGIS Server Administrator directory that I talked about. And then we want to ensure that your custom data provider is optimized for performance, especially if it will handle large data sets and request volumes. And we want to make sure that we're thoroughly testing our custom data provider and the feature service to ensure that it functions correctly and it's meeting the requirements that you need. So how does the data flow through the custom data feeds? Well, it starts with that raw data source that's not natively supported by ArcGIS Enterprise. And then it goes into the custom data feed format through GeoJSON and is packaged into that .cdpk file. And then we're registering that custom data provider that's going to run on ArcGIS Server again. And that's going to act as that intermediary between the data source and the client. And again, the client could be pro, it could be someone using a web app or a web application. And then we can take that feature service and we can consume it in those applications. And that will display as JSON. So we kind of get that whole process where we go from raw data to GeoJSON over into JSON where it can now be consumed. And so the last thing about the custom data feed components is to ensure that it's successful, I think preparation and planning is key. It's highly recommended to have this on 2 separate machines. So much to the point that I'm discouraging you now from installing it on the same machine. And I have friends in tech support, so if you call in with a tech support issue because you installed it on one machine, they will definitely know what's going on over there. But you want to have a development machine that's compatible, typically with the version of Node JavaScript that's running, and we'll have to have the Enterprise SDK installed on it. And then we'll have a separate machine. That's the machine that is running ArcGIS Server, and that will have the custom data feeds runtime installed on it as well. So you're more than likely going to need collaboration to get this done. So if you're a developer, you're going to need to work with your IT department. If you're IT department, you're probably going to have to work with your developer or potentially that GIS professional to make sure this is getting implemented in a proper fashion. All right, so I want to switch gears now and move over into system webhooks. Webhooks are a part of an automatic notification system that can let you know when a specific event happens within ArcGIS Enterprise. So when we were talking about SOEs and SOIs, there is a request coming from a client, and ArcGIS Enterprise acts on that request, taking action, right, to export that map in the example that I've been giving. Webhooks focus on when something happens in the system and you've requested to be notified of that action. It's really the don't call us, we'll call you type model. You can integrate these into webhook systems like Microsoft Power Automate, and then finally get a notification via email, Microsoft Teams, or even Slack if you're using something like that. ArcGIS Enterprise supports 2 types of webhooks, and I'll go over the difference between the 2 of them here in the next slide, but they are organizational webhooks and service webhooks. And all ArcGIS Enterprise webhooks, though, they follow a similar process. Once the webhook is triggered, event information is delivered in a JSON schema containing relevant information specific to each webhook type. Each webhook type has specific events that they can subscribe to. So for example, organization webhooks can be invoked when an item was published or when a new user account was created. Feature service webhooks can be triggered when a feature layer schema has been modified, or a geoprocessing service webhooks will only deliver information when a geoprocessing service job is actually complete. So let me share some examples of when you would want to use organizational webhooks. To automate notifications or actions when a user is created, updated, or deleted. So you could automatically add new group members to a mailing list or notify new group owners of changes. When you want to track changes to items within your organization, such as when new items are added, updated, or deleted. This can help in maintaining the organization and making sure that your content repository is up to date. If you need to automate workflows related to user accounts, such as sending those welcome emails, right? When new users get created, we kind of talked about that. When you need to integrate Enterprise with other systems or services, so when you need to use webhooks through Microsoft Power Automate or Zapier, or you're creating custom applications for specific events when they occur in the ArcGIS Enterprise portal. Or if you want to monitor and respond to changes that could impact security or compliance, such as changes in sharing settings or in sensitive items or modifications to user roles or permissions. Service webhooks in ArcGIS Enterprise are designed to notify you about specific events related to geoprocessing and feature services. So let's take a little deeper look into these two. So as we talked about it, those two are feature service webhooks, and the purpose of feature service webhooks are to notify you about changes to feature services, such as edits to features or modifications to schemas. These are really useful for monitoring and responding to changes in your spatial data. So for instance, when a new feature is added, you can have a webhook alert you, again, via Teams, via Slack. Geoprocessing services, they serve the purpose of letting you know, again, when a geoprocessing service is complete. This is ideal for automating workflows that depend on completion of geoprocessing tasks. So for example, you can trigger a notification or a follow-up process once a spatial analysis or data processing task is finished. Use service webhooks to automate tasks that need to be performed after specific events. For example, you can update a dashboard or you can send a report when new data is added to a feature service. If you need to monitor changes in your data in real time, service webhooks can provide immediate notifications. This is particularly useful for applications that require up-to-date information, such as emergency response system, or those live data feeds, kind of like with the weather example that we gave earlier.
Back over to me.
Back over to you. Sorry, I thought
Thanks,
I had
Justin.
one more slide over there.
No, all good.
Yeah. Oh, good.
All right, well, that was great. Thank you so much, Justin. So ArcGIS Enterprise supports our full suite of Esri applications like we talked about earlier on, whether you're using dashboards, story maps, you're building instant apps, experience builder, all of those sorts of things. But we also realize you might want to build your own custom applications that take advantage of content and capabilities that are coming from ArcGIS Enterprise. For that, we have a variety of client SDKs and APIs, to support your work. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel whenever you want to build a custom application, taking advantage of those capabilities and content. So in terms of the SDKs and APIs we have available to you, Justin, of course, spent some time talking us through those REST APIs that really provide the underpinnings for our entire system. And those are great. They allow our system to function. They allow you to interact with those individual software components of ArcGIS Enterprise. But as a developer building a custom application, you're not necessarily going to be interacting with the REST APIs directly on a regular basis. Instead, you're likely to take advantage of our client SDKs, the ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript, or for native apps if you're building native applications. Those are hitting the sharing and services APIs that Justin talked to us about. We also have the ArcGIS API for Python, which supports a lot of administration workflows, automating those, data science. We'll get into more details on that, but really empowering that automating and scripting that you might be doing at your organization. Now, we realize in addition to using ArcGIS, you likely want to take advantage of other technology, whether that be open source offerings or third-party technology that you're using to build your applications and to do your work. And we want to empower that using ArcGIS in tandem with those additional offerings. So we have plugins that work with ArcGIS Enterprise, whether you're using Leaflet, OpenLayers, Mapbox.gl.js, we have offerings for all of those to support you. So building on that a little bit, let's dig into these different SDKs that are available to you as part of ArcGIS Enterprise. First up, we have that ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript. And this is really intended for building compelling web applications that give you that rich user experience and support both 2D and 3D visualization. So whether you're working with just 2D data or you want to use those real scenes with the 3D element, the ArcGIS Maps SDK for JavaScript will support you in building those applications. And interestingly enough, the Maps SDK for JavaScript is actually what we use to build pretty much all of our web applications as well. And so if you're seeing behavior or functionality within things like map viewer, dashboards, story maps, experience builder, things like that, you can take advantage of the Maps SDK for JavaScript to build in those same capabilities within your custom applications. You're in a great place this week. We have tons of folks that work on the Maps SDK for JavaScript and can kind of talk you through how to emulate some of that behavior you might see in our applications within yours if you're seeing behavior you're excited about there. So for web applications, taking advantage of that Maps SDK for JavaScript is a great offering for you. Now, you might also want to build native applications, maybe native for desktops or for mobile devices. And the ArcGIS Maps SDK for native apps supports you in building those native applications. We realize you're probably building for a lot of different devices, and so the ArcGIS Maps SDK for native apps comes in a variety of flavors to support that work building for different apps. Whether you're developing in Java, Kotlin, .NET, Qt, Swift, we've got you covered with the Native Apps SDK. The great thing about the Native Apps SDK too is it supports a variety of ways in which you might want to be connected or disconnected to your ArcGIS Enterprise. Maybe you have native applications that you want to operate solely on data that's locally available on that device, on that desktop, on that mobile device you're working on. Maybe you want to be connected to ArcGIS Enterprise, pulling in data and capabilities from there, not solely reliant on that local data. Both are possible for you, and we actually commonly see a hybrid of the two with those native applications, sometimes being totally disconnected and functioning on that local data, and other times connecting back to ArcGIS Enterprise and then also ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Location Platform as well. Now, beyond those client SDKs, we also have additional scripting options and automation options for you. And the ArcGIS API for Python is one great way to do that. This provides you with a powerful modern Pythonic library that supports the latest releases of ArcGIS Enterprise and provides you with a consistent programmatic experience for scripting and automating across the entire ArcGIS product suite. And we really see it being used for three key workflows. First up is administrative workflows. So maybe you're responsible for managing users, groups, items within your organization. You can automate some of those workflows related to creating new users, deleting users, things like that with the ArcGIS API for Python. We also see it being used for content management. So maybe you're responsible for creating, authoring, publishing content to your ArcGIS Enterprise. Maybe you're publishing many layers at one time. You can automate that process using the ArcGIS API for Python. You also might be moving from one environment to another. You might want to clone and migrate content from that first environment to a second. And the ArcGIS API for Python can support in that migration work. Finally, we see ArcGIS API for Python being used for spatial analysis and data science workflows. Maybe it's on the end of data wrangling and engineering, all the way to something like machine learning and deep learning. The ArcGIS API for Python can support you in whatever type of work that you're doing on that front. Now, this really scratches the surface of those client SDKs and APIs And that's because we actually have a ton of sessions covering those specifically at the conference this week. I know we'll see a lot of exciting stuff related to those client SDKs in our plenary tomorrow, so lots more content to check out there. We also want you to hopefully continue your learning on these topics once you get back to the office. And so here are some of our favorite resources to help continue your journey learning about these things. We have our ArcGIS developers website providing you with tons of product documentation. A great thing here is it also has code snippets. So as you want to kind of get started, have something to get up and running with, it will offer that to you there. We have content and documentation about the REST APIs and Enterprise SDK Justin talked to us about, and then about those client client SDKs and the ArcGIS API for Python I talked through. Now, I'll remind you all again, we'd love to hear your feedback on this session, and we actually have a few minutes here to take questions from you all. We'll take them from the audience, and then if you want to just come up and chat with me and Justin at the end here, we'll also hang out at the desk for a few minutes after to chat more. So with that, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you coming through, and we'll open it up to questions here.
Yeah. In the back, yeah. Most likely, because that's not a native data source that Enterprise would support. So you would need to leverage a custom data feed for that.
Yep.
So you translate the data to geodata, but doesn't the software eventually hold it somewhere once it's translated into something?
No, it goes GeoJSON to JSON, and then that ArcGIS server can translate the JSON, and then we convert it back to GeoJSON if you're doing the editing.
Okay, so it's not held in the data store.
No. There's no data registering going on at all. Yeah, it acts as that's where ArcGIS server is just acting as an intermediary from the custom data feed to the end client, whoever that may be. You're welcome. Great question. Anybody
Other
else?
questions here?
Phase can be joined that custom feed to another layer that we already have been hosted in ArcGIS Online.
So you're interested in pulling in data that's not natively supported in ArcGIS and then combining it with an additional feature layer that you have in ArcGIS Online?
Not after combine it and then publish it as a feature layer.
Okay. So for ArcGIS Enterprise, since you're speaking to an ArcGIS Online example, one thing you could consider is ArcGIS data pipelines. That was something we saw demoed earlier in the plenary. That's exclusive to ArcGIS Online. That's not an app that's available in ArcGIS Enterprise, but that allows you to do ETL processes with data sources, combining existing feature layers with new content that you're pulling in. So I would check that out as an option. Not all data sources are necessarily supported to pull in, but since you're interested in combining those layers, that could be something to investigate. Great question. Right here?
For custom data feeds?
I believe we do. I can look it up quickly to let you know what time that would be at. If you give me a second here. And we also do have a booth at the showcase specifically about custom data feeds if you're interested in chatting with folks that actively, build this for us. All right, just looking at that. All right, tomorrow at 2:30, someone says. Thank you.
Thank you.
You can find this schedule in our Esri events app. Just search custom data feeds. Thank you for your help.
Yeah.
Next question.
What level can you implement? Does it have to be at the service level? Or, for example, if I wanted to restrict access to services based on role, can I do that by replicating it?
Yeah. There's a lot of people doing like restricting access and things like that with SOIs. So, yeah.
And we have a dedicated session on SOEs and SOIs as well, and they talk about kind of controlling access and security using SOIs there too. So it might be interesting to attend. Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
guy in the back over there, yeah?
Yeah, I'm wondering, I've worked for an organization that has ArcGIS Online subscription. We have standalone ArcGIS server. What would you say is the benefit of Enterprise in that case if we're happy with that configuration?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tough for me to sell you if you're happy with your configuration. I think the challenge will come into play is, as Maggie alluded to, Enterprise is self-hosted software. It gives you a lot more flexibility with what you're doing there. But realistically, it's the data sources. So obviously, you can't register any data sources with ArcGIS Online, right? You're only able to do that with Enterprise. So if you guys get to that point where you need to register a data source or have self-hosted software, that's really going to be the solution for you. But if we always say, if online is solving your problems, then you should stick with it, and we're not going to try to force Enterprise upon you. Sure.
Up here.
I realize this probably needs more specifics or be a case by case, but generally, how much work can you do in an SOI, or like how much should you plan on doing in an SOI versus trying to create your own application or just some separate processing or other thing? Like, I guess.
Well, I think that's a good question. I think the challenge is you're not going to be able to. They have different use cases, and so I think it's really what are you trying to solve with that problem. I think some of the things could potentially overlap, but they do have some uniqueness to them that will kind of serve for the specific issue that you have.
Yeah.
So the interceptor can do some heavy lifting if it feels like that's the right place to put it.
Yeah, if you wanted to do that, right? And so that's why it's testing the performance of it and going through it and making sure and seeing, hey, you don't want something making 50 redundant calls that are dependent upon the other to complete too, right? So yeah.
Yeah, we're happy to chat more too about your specific use case if you want to come talk to us. Yeah.
Good question.
Thank you.
Anybody
Other
else?
questions? All right.
All right, well, thank you all so much.
Yeah, this
Appreciate
has
it.
been great. Thank you.
Thank you.